today we're going to open up this the IASDR by introducing keynote speaker Don Norman. I'm supposed to introduce Don Norman, but do I need to introduce him? He's so famous, right? Don Norman recently retired from UC San Diego, and I don't know how many times he retired. Okay. So, he's quite impressive. If you see that history in the back, about 30 or 40 years, every milestone of design paradigm, Don is always with there, okay? Interface design, he's one of them, user-centered design, and all the way, okay? With his age of 85, he never stopped now. He has been leading that the future design education group. Okay, he's so active. Okay, he wanna see that what should we teach, and how there are things are changing. Okay, all those things. So he bring together. He's about to publish a new book. Don has been publishing book more than 10 books. I think. How many books did you publish so far, Don? yeah. So always new book actually bring that to a book design paradigm. People fully enjoy those things and together. Don today he's going to talk about what should we teach in the future. Okay, what design future education should be, and he came out with 5 maxims. What should we do? Dealing with a completely different type of design. Okay, he's the first one who talk about what human-centered design, user-centered design. He's the one promote user-centered design. Human beings should be first one. Okay, but he now deny. Okay, why only human? Okay, so this is very interesting. Okay, there's someone who create a new paradigm, but he denied. This is the beauty of scholar. Okay, so I think that's enough to introduce Don. Okay, hey Don, are you ready? Okay. What time is there?
It's 5:30, well, 5:20 in the afternoon. But it's,
good.
This is Sunday. Here it is Sunday.
Okay, good.
Here it is yesterday.
All right, okay. Now floor is yours, okay? Please. I need water too. Don, you can start.
Okay. So I will talk about some of the very things that you've heard about. It's a very different approach to design. So I'm going to start with my book and then end with the teaching initiative. But let's start with the view from my window. So when I sit and I write my books or do my email and I turn to my left and look out the window, that is what I see. And almost everything there is artificial. And why is it artificial? Well, it looks like grass and trees. Well, those were planted by people. And the lawn that I see in front of me, which is flat, but I'm on a very steep hill. So that had to be bulldozed to be flat. And all the trees were planted. And yes, we have many, many animals. We have hummingbirds and we have hawks, and we have all sorts of wonderful animals, birds, rabbits, and they're all artificial. I mean, they're real, but they live here because of the artificial place we created, which makes it a home for them. And if I look out in the distance, I can see the water. It may be difficult for you to see, but I can see the water in the near distance, which is what's called Mission Bay, and that's artificial. It used to be a swamp and was converted to be a recreational area. And in the far distance, you can see the Pacific Ocean. Now that's real. And I can also see the mountains from Mexico, another country. Now that's real, but the fact that I am situated in a home up in high, about 100 meters in the air, allows me to see so far. That's artificial. So almost everything artificial has been designed. Why do I say that? Well, it's because the very act of designing is the creation of artificiality. The science of design is the science of the artificial, which is a term that Herb Simon, the Nobel Prize winner in economics, called one of his books, The Science of the Artificial, which was a design book. And even though the field of design exists as an academic discipline and a practice long before the discipline was given a name, because throughout the history of humankind, people have designed the tools and structures that have altered our lives and our way of living. Everyone designs who attempts to build an artifact. It could be a way of doing something. It could be an idea. It could be a physical device, an artifact that makes life better. So we used fire for warmth, protection, light, and cooking. We invented ways of governing groups of people, recording events, counting, starting with animals that were being herded or manipulating ideas. So designs, whether by professionals or by everyday citizens, or not so everyday mechanics and tinkerers, sciences and engineers, royalty and servants, all of these individuals have created today's world, a world that is unsustainable, a world that pits the rich and powerful against the poor and weak. Now, one thing I teach in design is don't solve the symptoms. Try to understand what are the underlying causes. So today I will talk about some of those underlying causes, and I will tell you that designers have a real role in overcoming these problems. The root causes are political and economic, deeply embedded in our systems of government, economics, laws, and procedures, all of which are artificial. They're modes of practice designed over many centuries. And many result from Europe, from the colonization of the world by the European powers, who were mostly interested in business and commerce and in making themselves richer at the expense of the countries that they colonized. Europe also led the way in the Industrial Revolution, which has been one of the things that has, first of all, had many benefits, but has also degraded the entire economy and led to a class of people where we have the very rich and the very poor. But everything that we do are artificial, and because they're human-made, they can be changed. And it's designers who should lead the way. What can designers do? Well, it's not going to be easy, but no important problem is easy. And fortunately, designers, schools, and foundations are starting to address these issues. We need to change how the world operates. We need to design sustainable systems. And where design is done for and by everyone, not just for the few, but with sustainability and equity being the goals. So yeah, I've been writing a book. So the book starts basically with saying, let's study history. And why does history matter? History matters. There's a saying that the people who do not know history are condemned to repeat it. Well, that's false. History never repeats itself. But what history does is it teaches us when we're born, we are born into a historical situation, and everything we learn seems natural and reasonable to us because that's all we've known since we were born and the way we lived. And the fact that other people might think completely differently, that's foreign, that's strange. And so history really matters because we have to overcome the history of each and every one of us to think differently, to approach some of these problems. We have to overcome the role of technology and modernity. Modernity is a philosophy that technology is good and powerful and we empower everybody, and we should always be advancing. Advanced, what does advance mean? And that we should always be concerned with change, but not necessarily for the good, just for the good of commerce. So what I've done is I ended up with looking at what is going on and ended up with 4 maxims, not 5, Kun-Pyo, 4, and I will talk about them. Well, let me continue. So, first of all, I have a book, 4 design maxims, and they're divided into 2 parts. One of them is what they are, what you can do. 2 of them, what we should do, and then 2 of them, why they're so difficult. So how we need to do it. So what to do, the first 2 maxims. So let's look at the first one. You know, take a look at the role that economists have played in our lives. The economists have taken to heart a saying that Lord Maxwell, a very famous English scientist, invented, in which he said that if you do not measure something, you cannot understand it. So you must measure in order to understand. And people who don't measure do not understand the topic they're studying. And so the economists and the social scientists have now measured everything. And they've measured it badly and wrongly. And basically they're lying. They're lying to themselves and to us. And actually, Lord Maxwell didn't say what they think he said, because he started off by saying, in the physical sciences, if you cannot measure. Now, physical sciences are very, very different than social sciences, than people. For example, it follows a philosophy that mathematicians call path independent. That is, if I pick up a ball or a weight and I drop it, how it falls has nothing to do with its history. It doesn't matter whether I've dropped it before or whether I haven't. It doesn't matter whether somebody hit it hard or whether it's been very nice and well treated all of its life. No, it just falls. It falls by the force of gravity. It falls by laws of physics, which do not matter about the history. But with people, history really matters. We are what is called path dependent. And so measuring what we do, the actual act of measurement is have to change what we do and what we think. So we can't measure things the way the economists like to measure. And the economists say, oh, we will measure everything, but it has to be a single unit so that we can compare things sensibly. And the unit they chose is money, usually the US dollar, but it doesn't matter, it's money. Why money? Why is money so important? Why is life's important to be measured in money? And they measure things like the gross domestic product, which is how countries are ranked. We rank countries on how much money they spend. Nobody asks whether it's for good or for bad. If I build a huge factory and pollute the air and pollute the oceans and destroy the earth and mining so that I can pollute the air and the oceans, and I spend a lot of money doing this, hey, that's good. It's spending a lot of money and that makes the country seem very valuable, worth a lot of money. And now if the government has to spend a lot of money to clean up the mess that the factory made, that's even better. It makes the country spend more money and therefore gross domestic product goes up. So the harm is counted twice. It's crazy, just crazy. And that isn't what people care about. People care about the quality of life and economics. And so we have to measure things not by what economists claim, but by what really matters to people. Now, here's an example. Kate Raworth is an economist at Oxford in England, and she has something she calls donut economy. And let me show you how she says we should do it. And notice that this is from her website. As she points out, it all comes down to design. How are you going to design the measurements that we use and which ones are more important? And here is what she suggests. This is what she calls the donut economy. And it's hard to see my pointer. Let me see if this works. Nope. So we have 2 circles, it's a donut. And at the top is the ecological circle. And you see the red and the graphs going up and down from the circle. Those tell us how well this country is doing in climate change, in ocean acidification, in chemical pollution. in nitrogen and phosphorus and freshwater withdrawals and land conversion and biodiversity and air pollution. So what this says is you could look at this and say, ooh, this country is really bad in the climate change, but it's not bad in the ozone layer depletion. It's not bad in freshwater withdrawals. It's very bad in biodiversity loss. So basically, it says these are the important variables that we want to concentrate on. And we don't say which country spends more money. We can look and see which countries are strong in this and weak in that. And it tells you what each country must concentrate on. Now, that's only half the story, because the other half is the social foundations. And so the inside shows you how well you're doing in helping the citizens of your country in energy, water, food, health, education, income and work, peace and justice, political voice, social equity, gender equality, housing, networking. And so this is, we don't have to believe everything that's there, and it doesn't really have to be a donut. It could be two horizontal lines. But the point is, it's a new design for showing how I can quickly look at a country and evaluate it and compare it with other countries. I compared the donut for the United States with the donut for China, with the donut for Great Britain, with the donut for France or for India. And I can see where the things need to be changed and where things are good, which is really what we need to know, not the gross domestic product and the ordering of countries, which is, well, basically it's stupid. So that's maxim 1. What's maxim 2? It's we have to move from the age of waste, because it's waste that is destroying the oceans. In the year 2050, it's estimated that the weight of the plastics in the ocean will be more than the weight of the fish in the ocean. And we find plastic all over the place. Plastic is one of the benefits of modern technology, but it's this wonderful material made out of oil, and that is used for so many different things, but it doesn't go away. And the plastic industry keeps saying you can recycle plastics, but you can't. You really cannot. Most of the plastic that's recycled gets thrown away, or is burned, or is destroyed, or does harm to the fish, to the animals of the world, to the environment. We have to move away from this age of waste. We have to have a society that's resilient to these problems and sustainable. Well, there are people doing that too. So look, I was just in London a month ago, and the Design Museum in London had a wonderful exhibit called The Waste Age. And it's difficult to read, but right over there, it's called, the name of the exhibit is Waste Age, and the subtitle is, What Can Design Do? Now, why do they do it that way? Well, Justin, who's the curator of the Design Museum, who did a wonderful, brilliant job of putting this together, he said, you know, design has helped create our wasteful society, and it will be crucial in building a cleaner future. There is so much we can do, but it begins with understanding our waste. Why is it? You know, in 1971, Victor Papanek wrote a book called Design for the Real World. And the very first sentence of that book, the very first sentence said, there is no field more evil than design. And then he thought a minute and he wrote, well, maybe there's a field that's even worse. Maybe it's the field of advertising that causes people to buy all the crap that designers build. Well, that was 1971. That was 50 years ago. And it's still just as true as when he uttered it, because we make these wonderful, beautiful products. I mean, look, here's my cell phone. It's wonderful and beautiful and thin and lightweight, but this is a new one. It's brand new because the old one kept getting cracked. The case was coming apart. And why does the case come apart? Because the battery is going bad and the battery is expanding and expanding. And if I'm not careful, it's about to catch on fire. So I replaced the battery once. And then a year later, it happened again. So I replaced the battery a second time. And then a year later, it happened again. And so I bought a new phone. Because I can't replace the battery. I had to take it to a special place. We make things that are glued together. They're so thin, so wonderful that you can't repair them. Only experts can repair them, and even they can't repair a lot of it. And when you throw it away at the end, you can't really reuse the parts because they're so cleverly put together in such a way that it's too expensive to take it apart and recover the valuable material that's inside. We design badly. We design for the wrong reasons. That's where designers can play a part. Designers have to lead the way to make this change. So I also, when I was in London, I went to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is located on an island just south of just south of London, just south of England. But they were in London for that week. And so I spent 3 days with them. They also were partially responsible for the Design Museum's exhibit on waste. And what they've argued for is building a circular economy. And we have today is a linear economy. We destroy the environment to rip out the materials that we then transform, but again, with all sorts of evil waste, to the materials that can go into the products that we use. And we send those to the companies that make those products, and then they manufacture. And in the manufacturing, they also spit out more pollution, and then they sell it. So a cell phone today gets purchased by millions of people. It isn't the one, you don't design it for a person, you design it for a million. And it's crazy. So I was in Ahmedabad, India, which has a huge mountain of discarded electronics that's burning. It burns because the batteries, when they grow old, they get hot and they catch on fire, and there's poisonous fumes coming up. And the poor Indians are climbing up the mountain, trying to find things where they can take apart and rip out a little bit of valuable copper or titanium or any component that might be sellable to help them. And that's horrible, just horrible. And why are designers building this? And I say it's not really the fault of designers. So Papanek was wrong in blaming designers. You know why? Because almost every one of you designers don't have control over what you're building. If you work for a design firm, or if you work in a company, you're in the middle levels. In a design firm, you can only build what your clients want you to do. And in a company, you're in the middle level. You don't control what the company does. How many countries in the world have chief design officers who sit at the same level as the chief executive officer, who have a say in what we're doing? The number of companies is 10, 12, maybe 20. The large companies, large important companies, very few of them. And as long as designers don't have a say, we have to do what we either have to lose our job or build what people want us to build in the way they want us to build it. And this notion of building for thinness, for sleekness, for aesthetic beauty is destroying the planet. We have to change that. So let me go to the slide. Let's build a circular economy. Like instead of linear, where you rape, build, discard, it's circular. We take materials that come from the previous things, and we use those to make the next thing that is repairable and upgradable. And as the stuff that I've circled in red, it is time to rethink how we design, make, and use things. Use the things that we need, from the food we eat to the clothes that we wear. It is time to rethink how we design, make, and use the things we need. And this picture is hard to understand, but it sort of shows you on the left, this circle is nature. How nature grows and can reuse its own stuff. When things die in nature, they decompose in a way that's useful, fertilizer or food for other animals and other plants and other living things. And so it goes around in a circle and a circle and a circle. Whereas when we maintain things, well, we don't, but we can. What we can do is we can take finite materials and try to do in the parts manufacturing and the products and the service providers and the people, and we maintain and reuse and refurbish and remanufacture so that the cycle goes around like this with minimum need for new materials and minimum need to discard into the trash. So those are my two major maxims, because they hit the economics of the world, which really is important, critically important. And they hit the sustainability problems, which is destroying the atmosphere. And that's just going to lead, that has already led to climate change that may destroy the world. So climate change is the huge problem we have to fight, but climate change is not the problem. Climate change is a symptom of these underlying issues that we have to do. We have to change. But how do we do that? Well, design maxim says, and this is the hardest of all of them, because for the other two, there are existing solutions. We just have to make sure they get used. But here we have to change things, especially beliefs and behaviors that disrupt societal, health, and ecological systems. That's hard because we have to change the way of governing. We have to change the reward structure of academics who get published not for doing great things that saves lives. No, we get rewarded for publishing in important papers, in important journals. If I have a paper published in Science, oh my goodness, I can be promoted. If I build something that saves 1,000 lives, well, that's nice, but was it refereed? We have a really horrible reward system in academics. In academics, you're rewarded only for doing your narrow little thing. People who go across disciplines are punished because when you get promoted, well, we get promoted by getting outside letters of experts around the world. And if you work with many different disciplines, well, no single discipline has seen it all. And so we are punished for doing the brilliant work that we can do. Second is the reward structure in industry rewards profits. Doesn't matter if we destroy the world. They reward profitability. And they reward growth. There's no reason that companies have to grow. The only reason they have to grow is to reward the investors. Well, in the Bible, Jesus once said, throw out the money changers. And he was right, because they were the ones who were making all the money. Well, that hasn't changed. And he, by the way, he said, throw them out. He didn't look at the underlying causes. He looked at the symptoms. So even Jesus missed the point. We have to change a lot. We have to change the whole way in which we govern ourselves. And that's not going to be easy. But it's a design problem. It really is. It's a design problem. Now, the last one is relatively easy, but it's not the way we do most of our work because, look, if you design things the way I have taught you to design, that's acting pretty aggressively. That means you're a colonist. You go in and you go and you send the design researchers in to study a society, to study people, to understand what their really needs are. And then we come back, we do ideation and we do prototypes and we test and all that. And we come back and we tell the people, this is the solution to your problem. No, that's the wrong way to design. So yeah, that's what we have to do today when we're building something for 1 million people. But we should stop building for 1 million people. We should build for the individual cultures that are therefore different. Each one is different. Let them decide. So we must design collaboratively. We have to design with the people where we act as mentors, facilitators, and it's driven by their needs. But new methods of manufacturing coming upon us. And here's where the virtue of AI and 3D printing and additive manufacturing is going to be powerful. That instead of we make things by the millions because it's cheaper. But we could start making things by the thousands that are roughly the same price because it's so simple. We could have small manufacturing things even in your home or certainly in your local city. As the 3D printers get better and better and better, and some of them are very good today, and as our tools get better and better, and the artificial intelligence actually helps us design because it helps us try out 1 million different things. It knows how to figure out the interior strength of the components. So we can make something that has less material and is lighter and yet is stronger than one that is of solid material and therefore cheaper. So there's a lot of benefits if we use the technology right. Now, all technology can be used badly. And artificial intelligence has certainly been used badly because it was designed by technologists who don't understand people. Well, designers are the bridge between people and technology. So designers have to know about history. You really do. About economics. Well, that's because it's so important in the lives of the world. And you have to know about business. and you have to know about materials, and you do have to know all the principles of design, and you have to know about people. Because people, people don't behave logically. And I say, that's very simple. Why should they behave logically? Logic is artificial. Logic is not how people think. It was invented by philosophers and engineers who think that's the proper way to think. Well, they can think that all they like, but it's not how most of us think. It's not even how they think, except they don't want to admit it. So we have to change everything. So that's going to be hard. So I am working on that. So the last part of my talk, because I want to leave some time for questions, is to say, yeah, designers can get us out of this mess, but not today's designers. We need a different form of education, as you heard, a broader form, different. And this is a quote, it's actually from me. I saw it on a website and I said, oh, that's pretty clever. And then I saw the website said it came from me. So, oh yeah, I remember. The problem isn't with today's design. The design work that we do is really wonderful and beautiful, and I love it. But it's the world where the problem is, and the world has changed, and therefore we have to change, and we need to expand our design work to fit that world. So we have launched a big initiative. We call it the Future of Design Education, and the URL is futureofdesigneducation.org. Future of Design Organization, futureofdesigneducation.org, called Rethinking Design Education. And we have 700 people who volunteered. We've divided it up into different working groups on different topics, and over 100 people are in these working groups. They come from 29 countries. And we're in year 2, and we used to say it was a 2-year project, and then we said it was a 3-year project. And I now think it's a 4-year project. It's not easy. And this is the working groups. Don't worry about trying to read them. I just wanted to show you that they're pretty general in a lot of different topics. We're doing community engagement. We're talking about 2 different kinds of doctorate degrees for the people who teach, PhDs and Doctor of Design. The Doctor of Design is primarily a practitioner's degree, and the PhD is an academic's degree, but they should be thought of as at the same level. They're just different a little bit in the training. We need to have groups on ethics, on foresighting, on design methods, sustainability, systems thinking, representational approaches, product and service development. I really believe that service is the future of design, because service design looks at a system. So we have a group on systems, but we decided service design was so important it had to be separate, because service says, there are lots of people involved in making something work well. You can see me and hear me because all sorts, as you heard, hundreds of people behind the scenes have worked to make this possible today. So you have to look at this vertical dimension, all the people that are hidden behind this curtain that you don't see. And then you have to look at it's the journey map, what happens in time. And we look over the variability in time, and we look at it for each of the different people, how they construct it. Now that's a systems analysis that we don't tend to do in simple product design, but we ought to, because products are really systems. Products are not just a product delivers an experience for you. So it truly is a function as a system. We also look at universal design, at the way the indigenous communities of the world think differently. So when you look forward into the future, some communities don't. Why do you look forward into the future? When you look in front of you, you can see what's there. You can see the past. You can't see the future. So the past is in front of you, they say, and the future is behind us because we don't know what it is. A whole different point of view from some indigenous cultures. Lots of things are different in indigenous cultures. For example, why do we have a week? What is a week? Has no sense, not even in astronomy. A week is artificial. Some cultures don't have weeks. And some cultures had weeks of 10 days or 5 days. The French during the French Revolution wanted everything to be 10, binary, digital. So they had 10 months in the year. They had 10 hours in the day, and it was each hour had 100 minutes and each minute had 100 seconds. That didn't catch on, as you know, but it's all artificial. It was just as sensible as the way we do things. Seasons, why do we have 4 seasons? It's arbitrary. Why do they start and end when they do? Well, the astronomers told us that it's when the sun is when it's the longest day of the year or the shortest day of the year, or when it's equal. That doesn't make sense. Lots of cultures don't have 4 seasons. They have maybe 2 seasons or sometimes 3, because the season is when they can change what they're doing. And when should the season change? Not when the scientists tell us, when the weather tells us. But that's not how we do things today. That's pluriversal design, though. And obviously, we're looking at new technologies, and also a lot of education today won't be in universities, because you need to be educated continually throughout your life. I like to think that I have learned a new topic every single year. Now I keep young. That plus a lot of exercise. And also because I chose the right parents. But non-degree education is going to be the future of education, I think. So there are more groups that we need, and we haven't put it together into a coherent mess. A coherent story. And so we're working on it. So we started with a small executive committee that led to a larger steering committee. They appointed the working groups. The working groups are now working. And when they're finished, we're going to have a compilation process, review, combine, add overview and connecting material that will lead to a final document that we will have to test and study and revise. And then we release it to the community. And that's what I'm doing with my 5th retirement. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Don. Don is really the person who enjoyed being questioned, okay, challenged, okay. So I'd like to welcome all the questions. Is there any questions?
Gino, Hong Kong PolyU. You talk about kind of the how things are created, and a lot of things are artificial. Arguably, the ancient Greeks were very careful to distinguish between phusis, which are things that happen in nature, and techne, that have gone through the filter of the mind. And they were very careful to distinguish that, because they were very careful to distinguish between kind of the natural order of things and the true nature of things versus the abstraction that you talk about and the artificial constructions that you point out in many of these ways. And I just was wondering, because within that, each person also has arguably a nature of who they are and why they're here. And related to education, that nature is within each person. And what happens is we get caked on with all of this legacy systems that we've built, and a lot of things that people thought were the best things, like plastics, or the idea that people should own guns. You know, these are all ideas that people had in the past that may not be so relevant today. And so in education, how do we get people to reconnect to that true nature within them that's independent of all of this caked on stuff that is brought on by this legacy of living in the modern world? And then can we then create from that? In the early days, actually it was the shamans, and talking about the indigenous education, it was these people that had access to these other forms of knowing that were the ones that were creating the new stories that influenced people. Could you comment a little bit about that? Again, phusis, techne, true nature within individuals, and then finding that nature within the modern context for education. Thank you.
Thank you. That's one reason I said that my maxim 3, where things must change, is the hardest of all. Because of our history, when we grow up, we don't even realize. It never occurs to us that things could be different. There's a wonderful quote by Nehru, who was the first governor of India, when India was finally separated from England. And actually during the process, Pakistan was separated from India for all sorts of complex reasons. Nehru talked about the colonizing of India and how he had to live under the Indian rule. And he said, it's really amazing that we all took it for granted. Nobody thought that it could be different. And so he's someone who lived through it and discovered and helped make it different. But he himself was surprised about how long it took him himself to understand this. The Greeks may have made this wonderful distinction, but the Greeks also invented ways of government. And one of the things that a lot of these early societies did was they fought with other societies. The Greeks were always at war with the neighboring groups and they were the empires that were coming from Asia that would sometimes overtake the Greeks or the Romans. So it was more complex than that. I think the way you have to approach this in education is not by trying to tell people that what they know is wrong or to try to change things directly, because the parents will object, because the parents are not being educated. The parents are saying, you're teaching our kids nonsense or evil. I think the way to do it is what I call task-based learning. You give kids interesting problems to work on, to maybe, and we're doing this in a lot of courses. You take young kids in kindergarten or the first few grades, and they have to tend a garden. But while they're tending the garden, they also do measurements about how much it's rained, about the temperature every day, about the winds, about which plants do well and which don't, and where they're located and what might be the reason. So they're learning some scientific methods, but they're also learning what's bad. So as a result, they're learning that heavy smog destroys the plants and that the pollution destroys the plants. And you can do this at other topics. Let the kids sort of discover things by themselves, but you carefully set up the situation so they can't help but discover it. And that's when they can start to learn. And that's when I think we can start to have people appreciate that we live in a complex system. And it isn't us observing the system of the world. We are one of the components of the world. And so things that we do change the world, and the world in turn changes us. And so the way we have to educate, I believe, is this very slow thing of getting people to be more sensitive to understanding the way things are happening around them. Today, education is horrible. It's memorization. It's people, they have to learn to do this, they have to learn to do that. Students don't know why they're learning it. And so they often don't like it. They often hate school. They love school when they're doing something which they can understand, where they can build on. And I think that's the secret.
All right, okay. Any other question, Flo? Okay, Susan.
Hi, John. Thank you very much for, this is Susan Evans at Hong Kong Polytechnic. Thank you very much for bringing attention to this radical change in design's approach. My question actually comes back to the economy. And I love what you've just said about, moving away from GDP. But what you did mention, there were two things you mentioned. One was like, how do we measure nationals differently? And then you said it comes down to the culture of the people. I guess what I would push back on is that, do we really have to measure nationals, or can we really start to diversify this and start to look at the cultures of people in place, whether that be a city or like an urban environment, but not go to the national level? I mean, really go radical.
That's very good, because if you build on something else I said, what is a nation? It's an artificial set of boundaries that it actually had to do with how powerful the warlords of that country happen to be. And so China is huge, India is huge, and countries in Europe, some of them are very tiny. And so with India and China and any large country, the United States, there are many, many very different cultures who live differently and have different belief systems. And yeah, maybe we should look at each of those individually. In fact, the United States is not one country. The name is the United States. The assumption that we have 50 different states which have different philosophies, different ways of living, they're united in some sense, but if you actually watch the way we pass our laws, it's not obvious they are united at all. We also have the United States of Mexico, Estados Unidos de Mexico. So that's the same kind of pattern. And you're right. All these divisions, our political divisions, are arbitrary and artificial. And actually, if you want to understand people and help make people's lives better, we should draw the boundaries that are sensibly organized by the kinds of people within it, so that people can live their lives the way they wish, and the people adjacent to them want to live their lives differently, yes, that's fine. There is a saying by Karl Popper, a philosopher, which is, we must be tolerant of the way other people live. However, in order for us to be tolerant, we have to be intolerant of people who are intolerant. Because if you want to have different ways of life together, each one has to agree to allow the other way. You can't have them saying, no, my way is true and yours is false, so I will try to destroy you. We have to learn to live together with the differences, which can be really valuable. Diversity is powerful.
Okay, also we have some questions from online. Okay, what do you believe is a designer's strongest weapon in arguing for design and against economical advertisement and marketing management they have to defend their ideas and ideas in front of?
Yes. I have this question all the time from people who say, how do I convince my management? And I say, what do you tell them? And they say, we tell them about all the bad products they're producing and all the wonderful work that we do. We show them the prizes we get and everything. And I say, no. If I'm management and somebody comes to me and says that we're not listening to them and they tell me how good their work is, I say, yeah, I know your work is good. That's why we hired you. That doesn't make a difference. You have to look, one of the things we teach in design is understand who you're designing for. You have to speak their language and work with them. So who are you designing for if you work in a company? You may tell me it's the person who uses the cell phone. No, you're designing for your boss, or actually the boss of your boss, or maybe the boss of your boss of your boss. And what convinces them? Well, they're running a business. And if the business does not make money, it fails. So it doesn't matter how good the products are. If it fails, the company goes out of work, goes out of business. And so a lot of the things that we say we should do, like the circular economy and sustainability, is going to cost more money. And so lots of companies will reject it. No, if I do that, first of all, I was trying to say we're already doing that, which is false, but they like to think they are. Second, it'll be more expensive, and therefore we could charge more for our products, and therefore people won't buy our products. So there are two solutions to that. But we have to talk to the company in the language they understand. We have to show them what these new products will be like. We have to show them that people will buy them. We have to show them that they can still be profitable. There's a man named Amory Lovins who runs what's called the Rocky Mountain Institute in the United States. And what he always tries to show when he works with a company, he says, you see that stuff pouring out, the liquids pouring out of the pipes into the rivers and streams and oceans, or you see the black smoke out of the smokestacks? That's wasted money. You're putting what? Money into the air. I can show you, he said, how you can change your process so that money is you can regain it, you can reuse. Either you can change your process so you don't have to waste as much, or you can actually figure out a way to reuse that stuff. So he tries to show them that by doing good, they'll actually do better. He points out, I was very friendly with him for quite a while, that if you try to convince a company to do something because it's good for the world, they might do it because they're part of the world too. But as soon as there's an economic problem, they'll stop doing it. So you have to convince them that it's good for the company to do good for the world. Now, the other thing that you might have to do, if sometimes that's not always possible, and that's where governments are important. If government can cause regulations, this happened in the automobile business. Automobiles were not very safe. And there was an attempt to try to make them safe, crash-worthy, and with seat belts and air. It was not easy to convince the companies. And so what happened was the government said, you have to do it, it's a law. Well, that's good, because that way the companies did it, and every company had to do it. So they didn't get a disadvantage by having to spend more money to make the cars safer, because all the other companies had to do the same. So that's another solution to this problem. And over time, the companies learned how to make cars that were just as inexpensive as before, but much, much safer.
Okay, is there any question from floor? If not, we'll go on to online question. We'll move on a little bit of education, okay? You talk about the non-degree education, right? And someone asked you that, can you more elaborate the non-degree design education? What's the relationship with the PhD and DDES? Can you elaborate a little bit more about non-degree design education?
Well, those are two different questions. The PhD is look, science, the design has a very weak academic background. Doesn't have too many firm principles that we really understand. And as we move into more complex things, especially interacting with the economy, with politics, with ways of manufacturing, not just the materials, but how things are mined, how they are disposed of, we have to be different. And so we need a better academic background. And the whole point of the PhD is people who are more scholarly, if you like, but PhDs often are not the people who do the actual work, but they help develop the foundation for our work. And the DDES, on the other hand, is the field of practitioners. It occurs in all fields. You may not realize this, but they often become teaching faculty because they've had experience in industry. They go off and they work in industry and they know how to build products, and that they're very valuable because they have more advanced knowledge in industry itself. And also when they come back to the university to help teach, they have a lot of practical experience to share. Now, the problem with the degree program is academics is a weird, conservative, strange group. It's divided into silos where everybody's rewarded for being a real expert in their narrow silo. It takes you a long time to get your way through. You have to learn all sorts of stuff that you're never going to use. And so many people are opting out, say, the hell with that. I just want to learn the stuff I need. And so the non-degree, there are all sorts of places that are now offering little courses. Some of them are excellent, some of them are horrible. So we need some kind of way of being able to judge them. And that's one of the things the working group is looking at. How do we know how good they are? But there's no reason why I couldn't do an online course to learn some things, or do a 2-week course to learn some skill that I need. Or the courses should be as long as they are needed for the particular topic. Some topics can be done quickly, some might take a few years. Some I might be able to do while I'm working, and I come in and I do things for a month with learning things. I go back and work for a while, and after a few months I go back. I've now learned things even more because I've applied what I learned in the first few months, and now I can go back for more advanced studies. And so it's a whole way, it's happening all around the world. It's in part because there's so many courses on the internet, but there are also many, many basically groups of people who get together to teach each other. Sometimes people charge for it because they're instructors and they need to live, and that's how they make their living. Sometimes it's done freely. We are trying to understand this. We don't know yet. That's why we think it's more and more important, real practical knowledge. And I point out that my own education, when I went to school, I went to MIT, a technical school, and we were supposedly taught philosophy and history, and I thought it was horrible. I hated it. Didn't learn a thing out of it. And afterwards, when I was in my 30s, I began to realize that some of the history is important. That, oh, this philosophy stuff, it really makes sense what I'm trying to do. And so over the years, I've read many, many books on history and philosophy and economics that I didn't understand when I was a student. And so sometimes people aren't ready for knowledge. And so what's nice about the non-degree granting is you can wait till people are ready for it. And then they really want to learn because they now know why they need it. And so that's really very important. And anyway, we don't yet know how this is going to work out. That's why we have a group studying it. And that's why it's taking us so long. We're trying to study new ways of teaching that don't exist yet. Anyway, that's where we are.
Okay. I think now that we'll get some questions from floor. Anybody?
Hi, Don. Marty from PolyU. I'll keep it really brief, but I'm curious, how would you suggest that design schools go about attracting, undergraduate or graduate students who come from humanities and social science backgrounds, those who are accustomed to problematizing issues that are very complex rather than trying to solve the problem necessarily right away. How can we do that? Thank you.
Oh, I think the most attractive way is to get them involved in important problems. So I believe in having them work on problems right away is really valuable. Where, you know, some of the best designers in the world weren't trained in design. You know, they were trained in the humanities or in the arts or in history or in philosophy or in engineering or law, medicine. And having a training in one background is really good, because when you come into design, you can see how you can use it. But you also realize that design is different, how it puts things together. And so if we could create the right kinds of issues for somebody, say, I don't know, who studied literature, to come in and realize that a lot of what he learned in literature, oh, well, you know, people who write novels, they understand people. You can't write a novel without having a good understanding of people. Novelists are fantastic observers, and they often know a lot more about human behavior than the professionals and the psychologists and sociologists. And so people in literature are often really very, very insightful about these issues. So what we have to do is find the issues where not only are they interested in the problem, but they realize that their background can actually add new insight to the process. And that's when they start to, I think, get excited. And then if you discovered that you have to learn some other stuff as well that they didn't want to do, well, they probably will learn it. I'll give you my example. You know, one thing I was bad at when I was at school, so bad, my professor scolded me and said I would never amount to anything. I couldn't write. I couldn't write at all. I was horrible. And when I did in my undergraduate thesis, my advisor kept shaking his head and helping me and rewriting it for me and saying, no, I wasn't going to make it. And then when I went to graduate school in engineering, none of us could write. So we had hired somebody to do our writing for us. Well, when I actually moved over into psychology and I started to advance in the field, I realized that if I wasn't a good writer, I wasn't going to make it. And so I started to study good writers. And my thesis advisor, fortunately, was a good writer. So I would give him a paper and he'd return it. It was all red with his corrections. But I tried to understand why things were good and why they weren't good. And it took me years of effort. And the breakthrough came when I was, my first job was at Harvard University. I was working with George Miller, who's one of the most famous psychologists at the time. And he was known as a brilliant writer. And I discovered that his first drafts were horrible, and that he didn't like writing. And that was so valuable to me. It made me realize that, oh, I thought you had to be born to be a great writer. No, you just have to work at it. Well, that's the same with mathematics. It's the same with materials. It's the same with any of the skills that we need to do as designers. So we just have to, bring in these wonderful students who come from other fields and show them how the knowledge they have is wonderful and powerful. But they need to have some of the other knowledge too.
We have another question, okay, from floor, okay, please.
Thank you, Don. I keep my question short. So since Victor Papanek, we know that the world is wrong and design is pretty much wrong. And every 10 years, we get to know that the world is wrong in different ways. And then we know that we have a lot of design initiatives, let's say Milan-based since 15 years ago by Mazzini, and you're doing now this USA-based initiatives. So actually we have been doing quite a lot. Would you like to share some of your thoughts, like what things have been actually done? Are you happy with what have been done in design communities and what new things we should be doing? Because we all pretty much know that we need to do community-based design, people-centric, but what things have been actually done in the actual world? Thank you.
Yes, that's a good question. But I'd like to comment that I believe that there's a lot of really exciting stuff going on in design. And for example, if you take a look at the work of the Polytechnico di Milano by Ezio Mancini, it's wonderful. I'm a friend of Ezio's, and we talk a lot. And what he does is, I tell him that I'm following in his footsteps. He has a book called When Everybody Designs. And I say, oh yes, that's what I've been thinking about too. And he's really wonderful about trying to bring this across the world. So we are not trying to replace a lot of the good work. We're trying to discover it and make it a more of a core part of our curriculum, because it isn't right now. Very few design schools are teaching that in a good way, setting people out into the city. You know, you don't have to go to Africa or India or some foreign country to find these problems. I can find those same problems. I've been to Africa, I know the problems, I've seen them, but I can find the same things in San Diego. I can find the same city problems in almost every large city of the world. And so why aren't designers working in those areas? Why isn't that part of the way that they're being taught? Now, I do know a lot of design schools are doing just that. And so we want to find what we think is the designers of the future who are already working today and work with them. The way I like to put it is we're trying to do a revolution in design teaching, but you know, you can't have a revolution without revolutionists. That is to say, people all around the world who already believe this and are doing it. And I will object to you calling this an American endeavor. It's not. We're trying very hard not to be American. Our steering committee comes from, well, it is true, it's mostly North America. If you like, it's the global North. So most of design comes from the global North. And we are trying very hard to diversify.
All right. So here is another question about from online. Question is, what is the greatest obstacle to change in design education? What is the greatest catalyst for change in design education? So what is the obstacle? What is the catalyst to change?
The greatest obstacle is people like me, the old white establishment people. And so the greatest opportunities are the young, energetic, enthusiastic people who are coming in with different ideas. And my job is to enable them. That people say that I don't act my age. Well, that's because I teach in the university. And I think what's neat about a university is it's always filled with young kids who are trying to prove that I am wrong or that their professors are wrong. And that's wonderful. It keeps the professors smart. It makes us listen. It makes us debate. And sometimes when the kids try to tell me I'm wrong, I agree with them. And that's wonderful. Because if I'm wrong, I want to know. And so I think the biggest obstacle is the conservatism of the people in power. And they're not often, a lot of them are really good people. And maybe I'm one of those really good people, but who gets in the way. So we are really trying hard that it's the working groups that we have, which are composed of people from 29 countries, not just from the global North, who are going to determine what it is we're going to be teaching. And what the steering committee and the executive committee, which is all people from the global North and senior distinguished designers in academics and in industry, we're just sort of guiding it. Because I think the excitement and the new ideas are going to come from the young. And you know, I meet weekly with a group of people, and one of them you may know, it's just 5 of us who meet. And one of them is Arturo Escobar. But he's also an older white person, even though he's written the book Designs for the Pluriverse that have argued very strongly to allow the local indigenous communities to develop themselves. He comes from Colombia and does a lot of work with the people in Colombia. But I think, yeah, the exciting work is going to come from the young people.
Okay, I think you just mentioned about your group. So here is one question about your group. Some postdoc student wanted to be a group member, and he's asking that, is there any special skill set or competence you need to be a member for your group?
It's a group of 5, and it's because years ago, a friend of mine, Terry Winograd, a computer scientist, was well known for the work he did in language understanding and using artificial intelligence. And I was a consultant for the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center. And that's where he was working. He was working there at Stanford University, and we became friends. And then he met a person from Chile, a person who had been the finance minister of Chile, very far left wing. The military revolted. They threw him in jail for many years. And then he left and came to the United States. He discovered Terry. And he also discovered philosophy. So he went and got a PhD in philosophy. And he and Terry wrote a book called Understanding Computers and Cognition. Or no, it was, yeah, Understanding Computers and Cognition, in which Terry said, everything I've done in the past has been completely wrong. Well, I read the book when it came out 20 years ago and said, well, that's interesting, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I read it again about a year ago, and I said, this is a powerful book. How come nothing's happening? And so I told Terry this, and so he told Fernando Flores, who was his partner in writing the book. And so Fernando called me up and wanted to find out if I was intelligent or something. And we had this wonderful conversation, and then I interrupted him and said, you know, a lot of the ideas you're talking about, you want to read this book by this person. I've never met him, but he's writing this wonderful material. His name is Arturo Escobar. And Flores laughed and said, Arturo was my student. And so that's how we formed the group. And so, no, we can't have anybody else in it. We just had a meeting where we all agreed that we didn't know what we were doing, that we didn't know what we were going to produce in the end, but that every one of us thought that we had learned so much. Fernando, for example, insisted I read the book, The Empire of Cotton. And I said, why am I going to read a book about cotton? Who gives a damn? And he kept telling me for weeks I should read it. And I finally read it, and I said, this is a powerful book. Actually, I recommend it to all of you, because it showed how the English in the 1600s and 1700s dominated the world. They took over the world, they colonized, they developed the East India Company because they wanted to, because they had modern factories. Well, they invented the factory and they made clothes, but they didn't have cotton. So they had to get cotton from the rest of the world. So they colonized the world to get the cotton. And it goes on and on and on and on, but it tells you so much about the history of the world. Powerful. And that's the sort of thing I'm learning. And Arturo is always correcting me. And that's wonderful. That's how I learn. So no, it works because there are just 5 of us. And any more wouldn't work. And we don't know what we're doing, but we're all learning a tremendous amount. My book wouldn't have happened without my meeting in that thing. I started the book after I started meeting, and it dramatically impacted the way that book is written. And as you heard me say what I'm writing the book about, that doesn't sound like a typical book that I write.
Okay, I think after you introduce your that group, I think there must be many people to want to work with together. I think
the trouble is that when people work well in small groups, and when you start to have a large group, it doesn't work well. Okay, because with a small group, meeting for an hour or two, each one of us gets 15, 20 minutes to talk. If you had a large group, each person would get a minute.
I think we are approaching the last questions. I think you mentioned about national differences. Okay? Some question is that in developing countries, the main goal of design school is still to pursue industrial production. So how to convince design schools in developing countries to transition teaching design from market-oriented to human and nature-oriented, as you argued?
Why did it have to be one or the other? Because if you look at any discipline, any discipline in the university, say, it is composed of many sub-disciplines, each of which does somewhat different work. And there's no reason why we can't continue being really good at designing things for mass production, which still is the most efficient way of producing a large amount of goods at relatively low cost. I think we do have to change the labor situation, how we treat the people usually from underdeveloped countries who are doing the mining, manufacturing, or even the assembly. But we could be teaching the same basic stuff And we should also be teaching others who want to go out and do societal work and take the United Nations group of 17 critical societal problems that we need to work on. They could do that kind of work. It requires, the same foundation, but they have to learn different specialties to work in politics, to work with people from other disciplines as equals. But there's no reason why you have to choose one direction or the other. We could do all of it because there are different talents require different skills. And also the world needs all of it.
All right, thank you. I think do you still have time to get the question?
Thank you, Don. I'm just relating to the previous question, like coming from a developing country, there is something that we had in the past that will relate to like Ubuntu philosophy, where when we had a problem in a community, everyone was concerned. It was a community problem. And today when we see, like you said, design and designers, we're becoming tools, or we are a tool of like economic capitalism. And then as a designer from this same area, I get caught up like, I mean, if I become a designer and I have to live the life, I have to meet some needs that I have, but at the same time, I have to go back and think that I have to work for the community without expecting any, let's say, economic returns or anything. So there's that kind of contestation. When do we draw the line between pursuing our economic goals and economic desires, and then also thinking what is best for the community, but without any single pay? And this is the reality when it comes to economics. So what can you say about that?
Look, these are all hard problems. One would hope that the major societal issues in the world have to be overcome, but you're absolutely right. The people who work hard to do that should be compensated, should be paid. And so many of the times the countries themselves don't have enough funds to do this. And that's where outside investment can help. But right now, there's a lot of outside investment, foreign aid, that's usually wasted because they try to do these huge, expensive projects that never work. And so they go way, way over their budget and never, ever finish the project. If we can change the way foreign aid is distributed, there may be a better way of actually reimbursing the people. Because you're right, we can't sustain ourselves with volunteers because the volunteers have to eat, sleep, have a family as well. They need some source of income. And so we have to change the way that people are being paid for this. The work is critical for a community. Why can't the community pay for it? It's really hard. One of the sayings I have in the book is, it's a different topic, but related. People will work after a disaster. People gather together and they work to overcome the problems of the disaster, but they won't spend any money or time in order to prevent it in the first place. They wait until after the damage has happened. But we have to change that way, or else we'll have more and more disasters. And we have to change the way we support people like you trying to do good work in the community, but you can't afford to do it when you have a family and a life.
All right, thank you, Don. Okay, I think wonderful. As usual, I have just last question for you. Okay, you always open up new design paradigm, like interface design, emotional design, and human-centered design, and all those things, right? Now you come up with the future design education and those all maxims. What is major driver you bring up the new theme and new paradigm, new questions?
You're getting very faint. So what is the driver?
Yeah, what is the major driving source to make you change those kind of big new questions?
Well, basically, I'm always learning something, and I'm observing a lot, and I'm meeting new people and learning from them. And as I did this, I began to learn that a lot of what we do is not good. And I began to understand how history has tainted us, because the way we grow up is the way we think things have to be and are. And no, that's not true, but it takes a long time. And so every one of my books, to me, is a path going into a slightly different direction, but understanding a new dimension. And so in many ways, this new book and this new approach is simply a compilation of a lot of that I've learned over the years. It may sound new to people, but to me, it's a continuum. Yes, I have a different philosophy and I'm bringing more people in. I'm sorry, bringing new ideas in from more fields. I never thought I would worry about economics and politics before, but I realized those are critical to understanding the fundamental problems. And so I just felt I had no choice.
Okay, thank you, excellent. Thank you for, I think this is a very good, excellent keynote speaker for opening up IASDR. Thank you.
Okay. The one regret I have is that I'm not there.
Thank you for Don's keynote. And so we will have a 10-minute break. Then we're going to start our morning session, 9 parallel presentation sessions. So after that, in the midday, we'll have a short lunch break and then a panel discussion in the midday. And afternoon, same thing, we will have 9 parallel sessions again. And don't forget, we will have another keynote at the end of the day. So we hope you can get into your Zoom room on time. And if you need any help, seek out for our assistance. We have a whole team here and try everything to reach out to us, okay? Thank you.